3 years after her adventure with the demigod Maui, Moana receives an unexpected call from her wayfinding ancestors that causes her to journey to the far seas of Oceania. Now, when I first saw Moana back in 2016, I admit that I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I mean, I liked it, but I was far more impressed with the other animated film that Disney released that year, Zootopia. I was completely blown away by how mature and complex that film felt for being a Disney movie, and Moana felt more like a typical Disney feature by comparison. Not a bad one by any means, but a perfectly traditional and predictable Disney animation. Yet, as the years went on, my love for Moana just grew and grew and grew. Before I realized it, Moana was not only one of my favorite movies of 2016, or one of my favorite Disney films of the past few years, but it was probably one of my favorite animated films of all time. I've watched that movie more times than I can count since 2016, and I can probably watch it a million more times before I actually grow tired of it. Conversely, I think I've only seen Zootopia 2 or 3 times since 2016. And I still love it, but I clearly love Moana way more now. The characters are endearing, the songs are unforgettable, the themes are surprisingly relatable, the voice actors are unbelievably charming, the story is fantastically epic, and the movie itself is just endlessly rewatchable. So it sucks to know that I can't exactly say the same things about Moana 2. Yes, as someone who grew to become a massive fan of the original, and was definitely looking forward to seeing this sequel, it pains me to say that Moana 2 is an incredibly disappointing film. And I don't mean disappointing as in this is a good movie that just doesn't happen to live up to the heights of the original. No, I mean disappointing as in this is a bad movie, point blank, period. I basically hated Moana 2, so there's no way this sequel is going to end up growing on me the same way that its predecessor did. And I think my biggest issue with the film is that it basically feels like an unnecessary retelling of the original. Moana has a role and a purpose on her island, but something keeps calling her out to the sea. So she embarks on an adventure where, with the help of the demigod Maui, she manages to defeat mystical beings and an elemental god of some sorts, and comes back home having saved her island from destruction. That's literally the exact same plot of the original film. So the sequel feels like a largely uninspired features that covers the exact same ground as its predecessor, which was surprising and even a bit frustrating given how the film's overarching theme was to literally go beyond. But the film probably feels the way that it does because it was originally supposed to be a Disney Plus series. Yes, a Moana series was originally announced way back in 2020, and as the series was being developed, it was forced into becoming a full-length feature film somewhere along the way. And that made the final product feel like a Frankenstein monster of sorts, because you can definitely feel that the movie was chopped up and messed with. And that is undeniably sad, because it means that the movie is bad not due to the creative choices or the technical aspects, but due to the corporate decision to milk this project for as much money as possible. And that decision seems to have paid off in spades for Disney, since Moana 2 is one of the most financially financially successful films of 2024. But I'm sure the huge box office is more of a reflection of how many people of the first Moana, and not so much a reflection of how people feel about the sequel. Now, I don't know if this story would have played out any better as a series, especially since most Disney Plus shows aren't even all too well received in the first place, but I think if Disney wanted to make a true sequel to Moana, they should have started by making one from scratch, instead of forcing their creative team to turn the series into a movie. I mean, is the movie as bad as something like The Clone Wars, another animated movie that was forced to stitch together several serialized episodes into a full-length feature film? No, not by any means, but that is an incredibly low bar for any film to clear. And while I have been extremely negative on the movie thus far, I should mention that Moana 2 does have some good elements working in its favor. After all, the animation is undeniably beautiful, and the voice actors are all admittedly charming. But while I enjoyed seeing the impressive visuals and hearing cast members like Auli'i Cravalho or Dwayne Johnson having a fun time again, these elements just couldn't make up for how underwhelming the rest of the movie was. I haven't even mentioned the film's soundtrack yet, and that may have something to do with how forgettable the new songs actually are. So I think Lin-Manuel Miranda should have returned to work on this movie instead of Mufasa the Lion King, because I can't remember a single song from Moana 2's soundtrack. But I can still perfectly remember all of the songs to Wicked's soundtrack, and I saw that movie before I saw Moana 2. So despite all of the hard work that must have gone into making this soundtrack, none of the songs are as memorable as the ones from the first movie. And I think that's emblematic of Moana 2's problem as a whole. The entire movie feels like a less memorable imitation of what has already come before. But given how successful the movie has been, I'm sure we won't have to wait long before we get Moana 3. I just hope that when the movie finally rolls around, it'll feel like the sequel that Moana always deserved to have. A sequel where the good elements won't be let down by the decisions of a corporate committee. But I'm not exactly holding my breath here, since Disney is already working on a live-action remake of the original, which also sounds like a bad idea in my opinion. Because there's no way a live-action remake is going to live up to how great the original film really is. Moana is just a genuinely special movie, and it's going to be hard to replicate that lightning in a bottle. I mean, if the actual sequel couldn't live up to the legacy of its predecessor, then I don't know how anything else ever will. Because as much as it hurts to say, Moana 2 mostly feels like an unnecessary endeavor, and it would unfortunately not get a recommendation from me. But I appreciate anyone who took the time to hear my full thoughts on this movie, so as always, thanks for watching.